Today on the Diabetes Podcast.
Your CGM does not directly measure the glucose in your bloodstream.
Wait, hold on. What?
It has gone off anywhere from 2 to 4 times every single night since I started wearing this. I'm like, geez, how do you do this? It's like CGMs are like the boy that cried wolf. Many people have hypoglycemia unawareness. So the more time you spend below a 70 blood sugar, the less you're going to feel symptoms and signs of hypoglycemia.
Hello and welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. I'm Richie.
And I'm Amber.
And Amber, today, by popular demand, we're talking all about continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs.
Yes. Okay. So before we begin, this podcast is for education and is not individualized medical advice. If your CGM or continuous glucose monitor tells you that you're dangerously low or high, especially if you're taking insulin or a medication that can cause hypoglycemia like a sulfonylurea, do not ignore the reading because of something you hear today. When your symptoms don't match your sensor, follow your device instructions and your diabetes treatment plan, which may include confirming with a blood glucose meter, a finger stick. Okay, so we always have a disclaimer, but that one, this episode, I feel requires a little something extra with the disclaimer.
Well, so, anytime that we're talking about delivery of insulin, you need to get it right. This is not this is a very serious thing that you need to take seriously. We take it seriously, and you need to take it seriously as well.
Yes. So before we talk about what's tricky about continuous glucose monitors, I want to take a second to really appreciate how far the medical community, how far the treatment of type 1 or any kind of insulin-dependent diabetes has come. Because for most of the history of diabetes, glucose was essentially invisible. Think about that. You could not know your blood sugar number at 8:03 in the morning, prick your finger, put blood on a strip, get a number. But what happened at 8:15? You didn't know. At 9 o'clock, you didn't know unless you stabbed your finger again. And really, you could even go back before that. I've talked to people who have type 1 diabetes who can remember peeing in a cup, and you would dip a strip into that cup to get a range of where your blood sugar was. So there was no like exact number. It was like somewhere between 200 and 250, like you're in that range. And I apologize, I don't know those exact ranges, but people have described to me what that was like, in boiling needles for their insulin syringes. Yeah. Really big needles.
For me, it's just the number of data points is almost astounding. If these things are measuring, I think about 5-minute intervals is typical.
Yep.
So that's 12 times an hour, 24 hours a day.
Like
288, I think that's nobody's pricking their fingers 200, and it's certainly not at regular intervals. Where, again, for those that really want to get a handle on this, it's just a wealth of data. It's just an incredible volume of data that would be almost impossible to do manually.
Yes. I like that you say it's a wealth of data. So hold on to that, because we're going to discuss that a little bit as we go along. So you don't know, like, when you're sleeping, the glucose is mostly invisible. Exercise, invisible. You eat a lot of a high carb meal, pizza, something like that. You just didn't know what was happening to the blood sugar from that unless you pricked your finger. And continuous glucose monitors really changed that question. Instead of, what is my blood sugar? We could suddenly ask, what is my blood sugar doing? Like, what is the trend? How are things behaving? Now we can see direction, velocity, patterns, overnight glucose, the effect of meals, the effect of exercise, the effect of stress, medication, and then hypoglycemia, which was really not as well described, recognized, captured until continuous glucose monitors, unless you really felt clammy, shaky, had all the symptoms of a low and checked right in that moment, you didn't always know that you were having a hypoglycemic event.
And I don't know if you're going to speak to it, but just kind of outside looking in, I've seen any number of times when you're working with a client and you're talking with them about their trends as you're looking at their trends. I don't know that historically you would have ever been able to share that data with your clinician or with your physician so that they can see that and kind of interpret that with you almost in real time. Mm-hmm. Like, that's really cool for lack of a better, to be able to not just rely on this is how I felt or this was my journal of my numbers. And some people are really good at that. Most people are not, and certainly not to the level that these devices will provide.
And I think every healthcare provider that might be listening can relate to, we used to always kind of, I won't say joke, but like it was known in the healthcare community in the space of diabetes that you wanted that blood sugar record of finger sticks that had the dirt and the blood blotch on it and the food oil stain. Like you wanted that really ugly.
This was not pencil whipped.
Yes, exactly. Otherwise you had the one that went down the whole page, like somebody writing sentences in grade school.
I forgot to fill it out before I'm going to my appointment.
Oh no, let me. Yes.
Doing my homework in the car on the way to school or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different now. No, gone are the days of, let me excuse myself to wash my hands after looking at your blood sugar log. Yeah, because before it was just a photograph, a snapshot in time. And a photograph is just going to capture that one moment in time. And now we have the live photographs and oh my gosh, video. It's genuinely extraordinary what CGMs can show, and then also the data sharing among them, and then the integration of, because CGMs have allowed for automated insulin delivery. So I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself, but like it's easy to look at the flaw in where CGMs are right now when you don't understand where it was. I can imagine if you're a parent of a 2-year-old with type 1 diabetes, the frustration, like I cannot imagine the frustration of having your child have a 55 blood sugar in the middle of the night and you've got to prick their finger to verify that low. And it was only 69 or 70 and you're like, or 72. I don't have to really wake them up as long as that finger prick didn't. And why can't these things be more accurate? And I'm trying to deliver insulin in response to what these sugars are showing. Like that can be very frustrating. However, if you think about the parent of the child with diabetes just 30 years ago, night and day difference.
Kind of like our kids complaining about Netflix while knowing full well that they've never had a fine for not rewinding a tape that they took to the video rental place. Like, you guys don't know how good you got it.
Yes, but the stakes are we're not talking Netflix stakes here. That kind of sounded weird, but
I speak to what I know.
Okay. So the most important physiology lesson of the day, your CGM does not directly measure the glucose in your bloodstream.
Wait, hold on. What?
Yes, a CGM is measuring interstitial glucose. So it's measuring the fluid that is going in between your capillaries and your surrounding cells. So glucose travels from your blood across the capillary wall into the interstitial space. So there is a bit of a delay between whole blood glucose and finger stick and what you would get from a continuous glucose
Does
monitor.
that affect the accuracy?
It's delayed. So it's accurate, but it's accurate for what it was maybe a couple of minutes ago.
Okay.
So it's like a lot of CGM visuals when they first came out, a lot of the continuous glucose monitors would have a visual of a train, and they would always say that your CGM value is like the caboose of the train.
Okay.
So
as it relates to my blood sugar immediately after eating something, that's probably a thing to keep in the back of my mind, that if I'm 5 minutes into a meal, this hasn't even started to show up on my CGM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like picture two rooms separated by a doorway. blood is in one room and interstitial fluid is in the other. So they're connected, but they're not identical. So that's why you can get a finger stick of 100 and a CGM of 115, and you wouldn't say that, oh, this is broken, this doesn't work. It's measuring two different frames of space and time.
Okay.
So and that gap can get bigger if things are moving quickly. So when glucose is changing rapidly, the difference becomes more noticeable because blood glucose changes will change before the interstitial glucose fully catches up. And there's this dexcom education sheet sitting on my desk right over there that I love that literally shows a blood sugar meter reading of 170 next to the dexcom reading that could be 200. Mm-hmm. And it explains exactly why those two can differ, which is that interstitial glucose, where that's coming from. And Dexcom makes a second really good point in that flyer, and it is that finger sticks are not always 100% accurate either. A laboratory plasma glucose would be more accurate than both the finger stick or the CGM.
But I ain't getting a laboratory plasma glucose. So.
No, you don't have a lab to go check
Unfortunately,
that.
I do not.
Yeah. So there's three measurements. There's the laboratory plasma glucose, capillary blood glucose, the finger stick, and then interstitial continuous glucose monitor glucose. Related, 100%. Identical, not at all. So then that begs the question, how wrong could that be? So there's something called a MARD, or a mean absolute relative difference, that's just saying that this could be off by this much, the difference between finger stick and interstitial. Same thing with your glucose monitor. Your finger stick machine will also have a MARD. So you might want to take a look online and find out what the MARD is for your particular device.
Does that vary by brand?
It could, yeah.
Are there brands that are better in your experience?
I mean, you can have a different MARD within the same brand of different glucose monitors.
Just for different devices?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's something that if I were taking insulin based off of this, I would want to know the MARD for the device I was using. However, if it was just about what I could afford, I don't really care what the MARD is. It's giving me an idea of where things are going. And I'm not saying that the cheaper ones have a worse... I'm not saying that you have to buy a really expensive one to have a really good accuracy. Not saying that either.
But being the most important person on your healthcare team, all things being the same, if you have a choice between two different products and they're the same price and one has a better MARD, that would be a better device to use, in your opinion. Okay.
And this is hard for people in general because they want to know the number. Like, what is the number? I don't care. Interstitial, whole blood, just give me the number so I can do something about it, or so I know where it is. But measurement just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And so you can use, like, Dexcom has its own comparison approach. If your properly performed meter reading is 100, Dexcom considers a G7 reading between 80 to 120 to be within its comparison range. So if you did a finger stick of 100, Dexcom would say, we're meeting our accuracy guidelines if we're showing on your Dexcom reader or the Dexcom G7 app on your phone, if we're showing a blood sugar between 80 and 120. We're within that range, within that MARD.
So that would be... Again, not a huge deal one way or the other. What happens if finger sticks showing, and I'm just going to do easy math, 70, and it's is between a 50 and a 90 acceptable? Because that's two wildly different effects on my body.
Yeah. And so by that same range, your Dexcom could read 64 and you could do a finger stick and your meter could say 80. And of course, anecdotally, people have said my reading on my continuous glucose monitor said 55 and my finger stick said 92. And that is outside of the MARD. And theoretically, that should not happen. However, anyone that has paid attention, and I mean, we're talking 288 different checks throughout the day. Right. Surely at some point it could be a little bit off at times. Now, from, it's not really supposed to, but there's that word.
Well, so
supposed to,
again, is it off or is it delayed? Which is the kind of key word there.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is that it's delayed. However, I have seen instances where, and I'll take an example. One time I was in an endocrine office with a gentleman, and his reading on his continuous glucose monitor said 57. And I said, do you feel shaky? Do you feel lightheaded? Do you feel strange at all? And he said no. And he did not have his finger stick monitor with him, but because I was in an endocrinology office, I was able to get one, the one that they do when you check in patients. So they came and checked his blood sugar, and it was like 220. So no, he was not feeling hypoglycemic. But on further inspection, that continuous glucose monitor, when I had him like raise his shirt and look at it, it had become dislodged, and it was obviously dislodged. Like, it was like hanging on by a thread, literally. So you don't want to take it at complete fact. You also go by your symptoms, and all of the continuous glucose monitor training, when somebody first starts it, has that verbiage and training in there where it says, if in doubt, get your meter out, is one of the mantras that they say.
So in general, it's still best practices to carry that meter with you just in case.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a hard thing, because that is part of the burden of diabetes, is carrying all of the stuff. You've got your phone, you might have your pump device, whether that's another phone looking thing or beeper looking thing. And then you've got your insulin vials or pins, pin needles, syringes, alcohol, overlay patches go on there. Some people need barrier cream and other maybe like skin tack things to help them stick better. So there's like extra pods, extra reservoirs, extra like pump supplies, things like that, glucose tablets, snacks. So, I mean, there's a lot of baggage, literally and figuratively, that goes along with this already. And now let's add in the meter and test strips, which, it really needs to happen. And I'm not going to say, but that's another thing to carry. You really should have your finger stick monitor with you at all times. But you could say, but the CGMs are just as accurate as the finger stick. And in some cases, that's true. I always recommend a backup and a backup to your backup.
Yeah.
It's just the smartest thing to do. So accuracy is in these continuous glucose monitors is generally judged as an absolute difference at low glucose and a percentage difference at the higher values. And that distinction is everything. An error of 20 points means something completely different with a 300 blood sugar than at a 70 blood sugar. At 300, 20 points barely changes the picture of what's going on. 280 to 320, who cares? But at 70, 20 points, that's the difference between a 90, which is perfectly ordinary, and a 50, which would be the urgent low alarm. And now you understand why very low glucose deserves special attention when we talk about sensor accuracy. And to be fair, I hear, if anyone's listening with type 1, I hear them saying, well, wait a minute, if I'm 280 to 320, that's another unit of insulin. And it very well could be, which does make a big difference. So I'm not saying that it doesn't. It's just the inaccurate lows could be, you need better accuracy the lower you get, essentially. So I'm going to talk for a minute. I'm wearing the FreeStyle Libre 3 right now. I got a sample from FreeStyle to experiment with, and I got it.
And this, just full disclosure, you test a lot of equipment in your line of work. I do. You're getting poked and prodded pretty regularly. I've worn them as the guinea pig a couple of times, so you've seen a variety of devices from a variety of different manufacturers. Yeah,
I consider it a privilege to be able to really get an idea, even though it's really not even, it doesn't scratch the surface of the reality of what people who are insulin dependent and even people who have type 2 and worrying with their sugars all the time.
Well, it's important. It's important to walk a mile in the shoes.
Yeah, but I'm walking like 200 meters. They're doing the marathons.
Not discounting it. What I'm saying is, I don't think any manufacturer is talking about clipping this thing on a door, going through whatever and all, just the stuff that's not in the training, the actual practical real day inconvenience, burden, whatever you want to call it, of having something attached to your body for several days at a time.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it gives you value to other people when you see them wearing their CGM, like on the outside of their arm, or going to put it there, and you're like, no, we need to do the back side of your body or the front side, or like somewhere that you're not going to hit it on a door jamb, to what you said, because it barely pokes out a millimeter. It's incredible. Like, never in my life did I understand how narrow the margins are when we go through doorways and the way that we move as people. Like, I had no idea I was that close to hitting everything all the time.
I think the same logic applies to my pinky toe. I think despite its small size, can very easily clip all of the furniture in the house almost all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have, for 4 nights so far, had this Libre 3 Plus on, and I know that I don't want alarms bothering me in the night because I'm privileged. I am privileged to not require insulin to survive, and for that reason, I can turn off the low alarm because I knew I would get a low alarm in the middle of the night, and I only have it alerting if the sugar goes over like 200 or 250. But I cannot turn off the urgent low alarm. And it has gone off anywhere from 2 to 4 times every single night since I started wearing this. And it's been a high travel week, a high learning week. It's been like where sleep was pretty crucial. And this was, and I'm talking about this, and I hear the people listening with type 1, they're like, wah. like, I don't feel bad for you at all. Like, just imagine all the time. And I'm like, geez, how do you do this? Because I can go right back to sleep in the certainty. Now, I can't say, when it says 53 and going down, I wake up and I'm like, that's a compression low. I feel fine. I didn't take insulin that could be barreling that sugar down to a 25 before it stops. This could be life-threatening. I'm not concerned about those things, but I cannot help every time I get woken up to think, what if this could potentially be life or death for me in this moment? What if this was alerting me that instead of taking the long-acting Lantus shot last night, I accidentally took the rapid-acting Humalog, Novolog, Fios shot.
How many false positives do I have to have before I just start ignoring it? Yeah.
Exactly. It's like CGMs are like the boy that cried wolf. I don't know how people do it, honestly. I mean, I know you do it because you have to. It's the only reason anybody would, because it is something. Yeah. So let's, over my 5 days so far that I've been on the Libre, it calculated 95% of my time was between a 70 and a 180 blood sugar. 5% was between 54 and 69, and 0% below 54. And so at first glance, you might say, Amber, that's 72 minutes a day hypoglycemic. And so if I had an appointment with an endocrinologist, I would need to have a discussion about why I'm having so many low blood sugars. Typically 4% or less hypoglycemia a day is kind of like allowed, and anything above that really needs investigation. But it can tell me that it detected glucose in that range, but it cannot by itself say that was a compression low. That was, maybe you were like a 62.
Can you explain compression low? Because I don't know what that is.
Oh, that's a great question. So compression lows are so this is on the back of my left arm. So often when that alarm would go off in the middle of the night, it was because I had moved over to the left side. And even though it's on the back of my arm, it's not really on this side where I would put pressure when I sleep. The alarm would be going off because it's compressing that interstitial fluid. So it's not, the fluid ain't fluiding. There's no fluid flow in that space. And so it can read a false low at that time. And so the way to notice that, the way to differentiate, is this a compression low or is this a true low, would be to look at your graph, which would be challenging to do if it's 3 a.m. and you're groggy.
Yeah, let me analyze these graphs here.
Right. Let me pull up my 3-hour graph and see. In hindsight, you can, but in the moment, it's a lot more challenging, to say the least. But oftentimes in hindsight, because that's usually when I'm looking at someone else's graph, the blood sugar will be 110, 120 maybe, and then you've got like this burnt, it just does this little dot down, and then it's right back up, and it kind of follows that same trend around that 110 to 120 blood glucose level, but it's taken the stark kind of dip down. And it's usually just like 1 to 3 glucose values, and it goes right back to normoglycemia. But I think the biggest thing is, do you have symptoms in that moment, which is hard to discern if you're groggy and sleepy and tired. What's the difference between groggy, sleepy, and tired and lethargic, feeling like you've got a low? And many people have hypoglycemia unawareness. So the more time you spend below a 70 blood sugar, the less you're going to feel symptoms and signs of hypoglycemia. I've had many people throughout the years that are like, I can be 42, having a perfectly fine conversation with you, completely normal. And then if you look at like their percent time below range, it's usually something insane, like 15% or more below a 70% glucose.
That's just their new
normal. Sorry, I should not say insane. People do that. But
I'm just saying they've just kind of normalized what that feels like. That's just, or it's not so weird that it's a cause for alarm. Is that the?
Ask that again.
Is it a function of, this is such a regular part of my life that I don't get excited about it anymore?
No, it goes back to that concept of homeostasis. Your body is going to feel comfortable at a certain level. Same on the flip side, there are people that live 400 and 500 blood sugars and feel, I won't say they feel great, they feel normal, so that if they were to have a blood sugar under 180 or 200, they would feel like they have the flu. They would feel horrible, and they would go eat something to get it back up. And that perpetuates the high, because you don't feel good when when you actually are doing the things to get in good glycemic control, and then you kind of self-sabotage, not on purpose, because you don't feel good at the other numbers. I've had people go on automated insulin delivery therapy that when the targets for that, you want to set someone to a 100 or a 110 target. But if someone has an A1C of 13, 14 beforehand, and you set them to that 100 or 110 target, they're very likely to take that automated insulin delivery system off or yell at you the next day or two. They feel like they have the flu. What have you done to me? This thing is horrible. So you want to set the targets higher to start with, and then it is good practice for them to follow up with their healthcare provider to get that target down once in an incremental way without hypoglycemia.
Okay.
Let's go back to the crying wolf for a minute, because I think that's a very important thing to notice. And when people quit pump therapy or automated insulin delivery, when people stop such things, they usually stop it because of the incessant alerts and alarms. And I found it interesting that another diabetes educator had tried this on, and the first night of alarms, she took it right off and was like, nope, we're not doing this. And that has happened before where I've trained people on their automated insulin delivery system, but the continuous glucose monitor was started at the same time as that pump therapy, and it was just overwhelming for that person. Like, if you can imagine 2 different things, maybe 3 different things beeping and blurting at you, and you don't know how to stop it, and you don't know what it means, and it's disrupting your sleep, and maybe you're in church and people are like, shh, or so for example, I went to my sister's baby shower today, thought nothing of the fact that I had a Libre on, and within 2 minutes of walking in, it's like, what is that? What's going on? You have that on?
Yeah.
He was like, why are you wearing that? And it's just like, oh, I didn't even think about it. But it does help me understand that many people very consciously make a decision to not place their pump or their continuous glucose monitor where other people can see it, because they don't want any kind of judgment or maybe not even judgment, but like, I just want to come to, like, let's say in my scenario, I just want to go to this baby shower and celebrate this other person without me being the attention. It's not something I want to talk about, or, you know.
I think about diabetes enough without having to educate the general population on the ins and outs of my.
Yes. And it is a thing where people who have diabetes, especially insulin dependent diabetes, it's kind of like it has become their job for whatever reason. You could psychoanalyze that, but it has become their job to teach other people about diabetes and to teach them the difference between an autoimmune attack and the environment within the food system and movement and activity for a metabolic disease. Like, to talk, what's the difference between autoimmune disease and a metabolic disease? And even within the metabolic disease, how do you exactly explain insulin resistance? Especially when you think about the fact that we've had how many podcasts now where we break down what is happening within insulin resistance and within what used to formerly be called like syndrome X and metabolic syndrome. It is not uncomplicated physiologically. It's a lot. And a lot of people are tired of just always exerting that effort to tell other people how to understand them or how to put them into a box. And that's not fair.
Yeah.
Why should they have to do that? And I guess everybody would like to be understood. And at some point, once you've told so many people and you've explained it so many times, it's like, and then that person doesn't remember or messes up and gets it backwards, because we're human, you know? There's not a lot of grace for that, because it might be that one person getting it wrong that one time, but not to the person who's explained it 10,000 ways to 10,000 people in their life, and then they get it wrong. It just compounds. So I think this is a good transition to talk about time and range, because I've seen maybe only one person ever they changed their time and range targets to 70 to 140 because they just wanted to be kind of like overachieving, I guess. And their endocrinologist saw the report and was like, what happened? You were 70% time and range, and now you're like 55%. And nothing had changed in what that person was doing.
The range was just
they
much
had
tighter,
changed the range. Exactly. So in general, it's a good way to throw your endocrinologist for a loop, because we're used to seeing that time and range as a 70 to 180 blood sugar. And so it's one of the most valuable metrics used in the CGM therapy that's given us. So for many adults with diabetes, the general goal is to spend 70% or more of the day somewhere in between a 70 and a 180 blood sugar, while minimizing clinically important hypoglycemia.
And we've talked about some of the not so great things about the CGMs. It's worth saying that I think of one particular person we worked with that had type 1 that these tools enabled her to get to 100% for the first time in her life. And she's had this for, I think, 50 plus years or something like that. So, I mean, that was a tremendous win for her.
Yes.
To be able to really leverage this tool, even with some of the negative stuff, to be able to get some.
Now, to be fair, she had a CGM. She leveraged a CGM with automated insulin delivery for that result. So that is an important distinction. Because she had a CGM before.
But still would not have been able to get those results. That really, truly mastering the application of that insulin without this device. So that there's a lot of good stuff to be said for the CGMs as well.
And we're going to take that next step. We're going to take that into the integration with automated insulin delivery systems. And that was how the person that you're referring to was able to get 100% time in range, was the combination of a CGM and automated insulin delivery that was getting feedback from that CGM every 5 minutes. Let's talk about normal physiology for a moment, because we talked about this range of 70 to 180 as a metric for people who have diabetes, 70% time in range. So in normal physiology, you eat a carbohydrate. It is digested, glucose enters the circulation, blood glucose rises, your pancreatic beta cells sense the change in this rise in glucose and secrete more insulin. And your liver dials back its own glucose production. Muscle and other insulin-sensitive tissues take in that glucose. Muscles especially will take it in like a sponge. And your levels drift back toward baseline. And that rise and fall is not a failure. And that's important because your glucose is going to respond to exercise, stress, sleep, illness, hormones, medications, the makeup of the meal, how much carbs, protein, and fat, what you ate before the meal, and sometimes what you did yesterday. And so with me wearing this FreeStyle for 5 days, I had 2 events where the excursions went above 140. One was with an Auntie Anne's pretzel, and the second was with pizza. And these are the Auntie Anne's. I know when I have that, like, oh, it's not the most nutritionally sound thing that I can eat. But the Kava line, I wasn't going to catch my flight if I had gotten in that line. So Auntie Anne's it was, darn. It was...
It's just, it is normal for blood sugar to increase after eating food containing carbohydrates. That's an
increase. It did. It went up to 180, and then it came back down. And that reading of 180 doesn't mean pizza is toxic. In fact, that pizza was delicious. It had lots of veggies on it, and I loved it. And it's not that the 180 blood sugar doesn't matter. It's more about how long did it stay high? How quickly did it come down? How often does it go up that high? And what's happening around it? How efficiently was my body able to get it back down? And the patterns are what really matter along this, and how long it stays that high. And social media, the reason I bring this up, because I'm someone who doesn't have insulin-dependent diabetes or pre-diabetes or anything of that nature, is that the media has turned this word spike into almost like a swear word, like something sinister. Someone eats oatmeal, spike, a banana,
I can
spike.
think of one particular influencer right now.
I think of one particular too. I'm curious if we're the same, but we won't. Ain't trying to call nobody out. But they would have you believe that oatmeal and bananas and beans are potentially dangerous, and that's just not how physiology works. But the graph does go up, so they can make that leap from that. So glucose rises after carbohydrates. We know this. This is not new science. This is proven. This is tested. The question is, what does that rise mean in the context of someone's overall glucose regimen? A CGM can show you that food A produced a bigger excursion than food B. And so then you could look at why that is. And so when I look at the things that I ate with the Libre on, at one point I had this one little fried cheesecake ball. It's probably like 100 calories for this little donut hole looking thing. But my blood sugar barely spiked. And when you think physiology, why that might be is because it was fried in fat and there was like a cheesecake fat, it was the composition of that.
The majority of the calories weren't coming from carbohydrates.
Blunted the spike, even though there were there were definitely carbohydrates in there. But even though that one might spike more than the other, it can't independently tell you that this food caused insulin resistance and this food didn't, or that this food caused inflammation or damaged your mitochondria or caused diabetes, or that food A is unhealthy. That's an enormous leap. And unfortunately, the CGM wellness industry sometimes makes it. And we have to be especially careful extrapolating observations from people without diabetes into disease claims, because they are not the same, vastly different. So if you have diabetes, don't obsess over one dot, especially if it's a compression low dot. Zoom out.
And especially if you've got 288 dots to analyze on a daily basis.
Yes. So we want to zoom out and we want to look at that time in range. Like, how much time do you spend within your individualized target? And then time above range, how often are you above range? And then there's also like the very high section in the above range. So when you change something, it's always good to look at, okay, did those patterns come down? Did my very highs go down? Did my very lows decrease? That's really what did it flatten out as a whole is what you want to look at.
I have a question. When you're talking time in range, it's almost like the daily equivalent of like an A1C almost, because the A1C is really talking about how over the course of 90 days in just one test, how much of that was above a certain threshold to affect that A1C. This is really kind of giving me, it's not a direct one-to-one, and I don't know that it's necessarily going to accurately predict your A1C. But
it predicts A1C pretty accurately. That there's something called a GMI, a glucose measured index. However, you can look at the disclaimers from the CGM companies, and they will tell you that it is not directly translatable to A1C. There are things like there are certain blood disorders that could affect your A1C levels, so your CGM and that would not be the same. There's also, if you have kidney failure, there are meds that would affect. There's a medication that can affect your CGM.
I guess what I'm getting at is we've talked about if your A1C is above 7, the big kind of urgent goal is to get the A1C below 7. And then once the A1C is below 7, then it's really more, okay, let's look at those highs, what is surrounding those highs, what precedes it and what follows it and all that other kind of stuff. And I think that this tool, that this concept, like you don't get time and range with finger sticks, period.
Right.
Like that's not feasible, particularly since I'm going to be asleep for a decent chunk of that, right? This enables me, if I know that my A1C is above 7, this is a really useful tool. If that's the most important thing that I'm focusing on at that point in time is getting that A1C below 7 through change in behavior, through medicine, and through insulin if appropriate, this is going to give me a way more...
It's going to give you a lot of feedback.
But feedback specific to the goal that I'm chasing, because with a normal A1C, I'm only getting that every 90 days, right? So what do I do in the interim? I think I'm doing the right things, but I don't really have any kind of indicator of what realistically my A1C is going to be at my next checkup. This does actually give you that information. I should be able to see week after week, is the medicine and the movement and the food and all the other kind of stuff, is what I'm doing actually working?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's pretty real time, which is important.
And then furthermore,
why would you wait 3 months when you can
going
get
in the
real
wrong
time?
direction? Is what I'm doing actually not working? And that's a useful thing to, hey doc, we might need to talk about my dosage or whatever else. Most
people improve their A1C with a CGM alone. They do everything the same, but they add a CGM. And usually the A1C does improve because of awareness, because they're seeing, oh, look, I can pull this lever and go for a walk after dinner, which is something we talk about a lot, and my blood sugar numbers will come down. Oh, look, maybe I should go meditate after this morning meeting because the blood sugars really go high from stress. You know, if
you're a spiker, Cheryl. Let's look at this here.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see that down because the average, like just an A1C is going to show you the average. And within that, back to that person who has hypoglycemia 12% of the time, you could see that and think their A1C 6.8, they're doing fantastic. No changes need to be made whatsoever, but they're spiking really high and they're having lows. So there's a lot of, and that's the concept of glucose variability, which is also something to look at that's quite important. So you can look at like how far people go off of the mean, and you'll see all these little, like a little roller coaster ride looking thing where you can see like this is the middle. This is where you spend 75% of your time here. And then there's these outliers that occur. You can see that like across all of your days there. So two people could have the same A1C or the same average and have completely different lives and completely different blood sugar numbers. And one person could sit very calmly around their mean all day, and the other could be bouncing 55, 250, 70, 290, 65. And they could have the same average with that high variability. And the 2026 ADA standards recognize that A1C alongside CGM measures that time in range, the time below range, time above, the glucose measured index, the mean glucose, the variability, because CGM gives the dimensions to glucose that A1C just simply cannot. So basically, we just brought it all home, everything that you were just talking about. So then we have the trend arrow. So within glucose monitors, there's an arrow up, down, sideways, slightly up, slightly down. And that's a really useful concept that has also come about with continuous glucose monitors. Because if I told you your glucose is 100, you'd say, great. But if I told you your glucose is 100 with 2 arrows down and you took 5 units of insulin 15 minutes ago, and you haven't eaten yet, that could be a different story than just 100 blood sugar. And then 100 and climbing 2 arrows straight up, and you've eaten and you haven't taken your insulin, that's a completely different story as well. The number is your location, and the arrow is your direction. And then on top of that, there's also your velocity, like how fast are you going that way? And so we really want to know, like, are you parked there or are you accelerating into a wall? Or are you parked right in front of it, going 100 miles an hour into it? Because that's really important for your dosing, for exercise, for preventing low blood sugar before it happens. And so let's talk about the different devices. Or you know what? Why don't we talk about the different devices in the next episode? I think that we talked a long time. And so the next episode, we will get into the different types of continuous glucose monitors. And then from there, we will go into insulin delivery systems.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, this has been yet another episode of the Diabetes Podcast. Thanks for listening to the Diabetes Podcast. If you like what you heard, please click that follow or subscribe button, and don't forget to check out roadmap.thediabetiespodcast.com for that free pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes remission roadmap. Until next time, take courage. You can do this, and we can help.